Emperor Julian has one of the great leadership qualities, which is leading from the front. In all of history, every leader who has done so has been given the admiration and loyalty of the people that follow him. He does this on multiple occasions. First, immediately after Julian has received the purple at Milan, he was sent into Gaul with a feeble escort of 360 soldiers. At Vienna, where he passed a painful and anxious winter at the hands of those ministers to whom the current emperor had entrusted the direction of his conduct, Julian was informed of the siege and deliverance of Autun, which is in present day France. That large and ancient city, protected only by a ruined wall and small garrison, was saved by the generous resolution of a few veterans who assumed their arms for the defense of their country. In his march from Autun through the heart of the Gallic provinces, Julian embraced with ardor the earliest opportunity of signalizing his courage. At the head of a small body of archers and heavy cavalry, he preferred the shorter but the more dangerous of the two roads. The second notable example comes from the memorable Battle of Strasbourg. The bravest tribe of Germany, totaled 35,000 men, came together to face Julian's feeble 13,000-man army. Julian, who conducted in person his right wing, depended on the dexterity of his archers and the weight of his cuirassiers. But his ranks were instantly broken by an irregular mixture of light horse and light infantry, and he had the mortification of beholding the flight of 600 of his most renowned soldiers. The fugitives were stopped and rallied by the presence and authority of Julian, who, careless of his own safety, threw himself before them, and urging every motive of shame and honor, led them back against the victorious enemy. The conflict between the two lines of infantry was obstinate and bloody. The Germans possessed the superiority of strength and stature, the Romans that of discipline and temper, and as barbarians who served under the standard of the empire, united the respective advantages of both parties. Their strenuous efforts, guided by a skillful leader, at length dominated the event of the day. In the third example, the hopes of Julian depended much less on the number of his troops than on the swiftness of his motions. In the execution of a daring enterprise, he availed himself of every precaution, as far as prudence could suggest, and where prudence could no longer accompany his steps, he trusted the event to valor and to fortune. The army was split in three, taking three different paths to meet all at a predestined location. For himself, Julian had reserved the most difficult and extraordinary part. He selected 3,000 brave and active volunteers, resolved, like their leader, to cast behind them every hope of a retreat. At the head of this faithful band, he fearlessly plunged into the recesses of the Black Forest, which concealed the sources of the Danube, and for many days the fate of Julian was unknown to the world. The secrecy of his march, his diligence and vigor, surmounted every obstacle. He forced his way over the mountains and morasses, occupied the bridges or swarmed the rivers, pursued his direct course, without reflecting whether he traversed the territory of the Romans or of the barbarians. He arrived at the Danube River and stole the enemy's boats and provisions. The labor of the mariners, who plied their oars with incessant diligence, and the steady continuance of a favorable wind, carried his fleet above 700 miles in 11 days before his enemies could receive any certain intelligence that he had left the banks of the Rhine. The banks of the Danube were crowded on either side with spectators, who gazed on the military prompt, anticipated the importance of the event, and diffused through the adjacent country the fame of a young hero, who advanced with more than mortal speed at the head of an innumerable force of the West. Julian's forces were able to capture Illyrium's general and its largest and strongest city. What do you get if you lead from the front? Look at the reaction of his men. When he proposed the bold invasion of Illyricum to the assembly of the soldiers, inspired them with a just confidence in their general and in themselves, and exhorted them to maintain their reputation of being terrible to the enemy, moderate to their fellow citizens, and obedient to their officers, his spirited discourse was received with the loudest acclamations. Declared with eagerness that they would follow Julian to the farthest extremities of Europe or Asia, the oath of fidelity was administered, and the soldiers, clashing their shields and pointing their drawn swords at their throats, devoted themselves, with hard imprecations, to the service of a leader whom they celebrated as the deliverer of Gaul and the conqueror of the Germans.